he was blameless, he was innocent, and he was beautiful. And like all children, he was totally defenseless.
This whole case is about rumor, gossip, speculation and innuendo, and ultimately the state's bold conclusions about what they say happened but can't prove.
It is the case of Georgia mother Leilani Simon, who went to trial for the murder of her 20-month-old son, Quinton Smith. From revealing testimony of those around her to a wiretap recording to the arguments from prosecution and defense, we're going to break down this trial for you right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, everybody, so we are continuing our trial recap series for you here on Sidebar, and now we're going to focus on the case of Leilani Simon. This was the Georgia mother who was accused of murdering her 20-month-old son, Quinton Simon, over 2 years ago. It is an absolutely heartbreaking case, and it began with these desperate pleas for Quinton's safe return, and it ended in a courtroom drama that was filled with emotional testimony and also, I will say, conflicting evidence. So, of course, now you're asking, what happened? We go back to October 2022. Leilani Simon calls 911 to report that her son, 20-month-old, had vanished from his playpen. Now, Quinton's disappearance, as you can imagine, it sparked widespread concern in that Savannah, Georgia area, with local residents, law enforcement officers, everybody rallying to search for this missing child. For weeks, Quinton was the subject of intense media attention. His disappearance even drew national headlines. But as the investigation progressed, Simon's story of what happened began to unravel. Authorities soon found inconsistencies in her account of what happened. For example, while Simon initially said that she had last seen Quinton in his playpen early in the morning, investigators learned that the toddler had been missing for several hours before Simon reported it. And over time, it became clear that Simon's version of events was becoming increasingly unreliable. And so Simon was eventually charged with malice murder, felony murder, making a false statement, all in connection with Quinton's death. Here was the problem. Even though you had local officials who were working alongside federal authorities, they were all working on the case, there wasn't a lot of concrete evidence, especially since we're talking about a case with no body, there's no autopsy, there's no definitive cause of death. That's a weakness in the prosecution's case to prove that a murder was committed beyond a reasonable doubt. And over the course of the 8-day trial, prosecutors called more than 40 witnesses. They introduced nearly 100 pieces of evidence. The state's case painted a very grim picture of a mother who had not only killed her child, but had gone to the great lengths to conceal his death. And in particular, they focused on Simon's drug use, her troubled relationship with a boyfriend, and of course, her inconsistent, often contradictory statements about what had happened to Quinton. And one of the key moments came when prosecutors had outlined how Simon had disposed of her son's body in a dumpster, which was later discovered to be the final resting place for Quinton's remains. Now, the state didn't attempt to prove how Simon killed Quinton. They just argued that the evidence clearly showed she had taken her son's life and she tried to cover it up. So with that in mind, let's get to the trial. And we're going to start right now with the opening statement from the prosecutor, Tim Dean. And he told the jury that Quinton Simon was essentially betrayed by his mother, the person who was supposed to always protect him. And he told the jury in his opening statement how Simon killed Quinton and just threw him away.
Like all children, he was blameless, he was innocent, and he was beautiful. And like all children, he was totally defenseless, totally and completely dependent on the adults in his life to take care of him and to look out for his safety. And the evidence in this case will show that the defendant violated that trust, that most basic, sacred trust of a parent, in the most horrible way. In the middle of the night, she killed him, her own son, got in her car with his body, drove to a dumpster, and threw him away like a piece of trash.
The prosecution went on to detail a very telling admission that Simon had made to police, and the evidence suggesting that she was fully aware of what she was doing.
Now, at the end of the day, the most critical thing is what happened to Quinton. What happened to Quinton in the middle of the night. And here is what she had to say about that. I don't know if I did something to him, but if I did, I will take responsibility. She appears to be claiming something like a lack of memory, and I'll tell you that the evidence that you'll see is going to show that when she drove to those dumpsters at Azalea to throw Quinton's body away, you can see that she's driving normally. You'll see that she comes to a complete stop at stop signs. She uses her turn signal. You'll hear evidence that the investigators could tell from her phone that she plugged her phone into the USB charger in the car when she got in. So the evidence will show that she was aware of what she was doing when she took him there, and that her claims to just not know what happened cannot be true. They do not fit with the other evidence.
Now, Simon's defense team, led by attorney Martin Hillard, they obviously did not agree with this. They fiercely contested Simon's charges, arguing that the prosecution had relied on speculation and rumor rather than hard evidence as is required. And they contended that the state had not proven how Quinton had died, that the circumstantial evidence was weak, that it was not enough to prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And in a short opening statement, defense attorney Robert Peirce said that the state's case is wrapped in rumors and assumptions that they would not be able to prove.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't intend to speak nearly as long as Mr. Dean did. Because frankly, this whole case is about rumor, gossip, speculation, and innuendo, and ultimately, the state's bold conclusions about what they say happened but can't prove. Unquestionably, this is an emotional case. I know that. I have 5 children, 4 grandchildren. So I understand how emotional this can be. But this case can't be decided based on emotions. It has to be decided on facts and evidence presented in this courtroom. It can't be determined by emotions or their rumors and their gossip and their conclusions. And in the end, what you will determine is that's exactly the foundation of the state's claims. Bunch of conclusions, bunch of declarations, unsupported by actual evidence. These declarations about she did this at 1 o'clock, she killed Quinton. She drove here, and then all of that are their conclusions, what they have decided the evidence shows. But what is important in a trial is this witness stand, where witnesses testify and evidence is presented. It's not what some lawyer says. It's not what the state declares the evidence to be, and that includes this discussion about the statements. Mr. Dean has his ideas of what those statements represent, but that's your job. And it's not to simply rely on the state's conclusions about what they mean. The state has a conclusion. The core conclusion is that Leilani Marie Simon murdered her child. The evidence will simply not support that bold conclusion. That is why, after we've heard all the evidence and all the argument, the evidence will lead you to one place, and that is a finding with respect to murder and concealing the death of another of not guilty.
Okay, now it's time to get into the evidence. And as part of the state's case, what they tried to do, they set out to prove that Leilani Simon's state of mind leading up to this murder was unstable, that she was feeling unloved and neglected in her relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Youngkin, who they argued she prioritized over her son, Quinton. And what they did is they showed a very dramatic video that she had apparently sent to Youngkin, where she can be heard essentially contemplating taking her own life because she felt he didn't love her enough.
I wanted you. I wanted you more than life itself. But you proved that it was only one way. That feeling was only one way. That love, that loyalty, it was all one way. You take care of my kids, okay? You couldn't take care of me. You couldn't love me. You couldn't do me right. So please, for the love of God, do my kids right. There are kids running up at the river now, fighting.
To further show how Simon felt about Quinton, again, her son, the state called a former babysitter of Quinton's to the stand. This is Michelle McCarta. And she cared for him and his older brother, Zane. And she testified that Simon once told her, shockingly, that she did not love Quinton as much as her other child.
Can you think of some examples of how the defendant treated the boys differently?
Well, she was working at Bojangles, and she had brought food home. And she fed Quinton loved food. And every time he seen a bag, he would want it. He's little. She would feed Zane before she fed Quinton. Every time. And I just thought that was strange.
So, do you mean she'd give Zane food and make Quinton wait?
Yes, ma'am,
I mean,
absolutely.
She wasn't physically feeding Zane.
No, she would give him the food.
Just give him food.
And he would eat, and then Quinton would be, whining and wanting it. And she would give it to him eventually.
Did you ever say anything to her about that?
I did not.
Are there any other ways that she treated the boys differently that you noticed?
Just by the way she talked to him, when she would, once in a while that she did come and pick them up, she would, grab Zane and he would hug her because he was close to her. I mean, you could definitely tell it. And then, Quinton, 99% of the time, wanted to stay with us, and he would start crying. Now, if Danny come and picked him up, it was different.
Okay. How did Quinton act if Danny came?
He would go with Danny. He wouldn't cry to stay with us. He loved Danny. He would, Danny would pick him up and he'd hug him.
Okay. All right. Did Leilani ever talk to you about how she felt about the boys?
Yes, ma'am. She just, one time, and my daughter had more talks with her than I did. I didn't really talk to her that much. But she just said that she loved Quinton more. Zane more than Quinton. And, I didn't question it. She's a crappy mom. I knew that. But I just never said anything to her.
But again, we have to be clear about something. Even though the state couldn't prove how Quinton died, what they were trying to prove is that Simon actually did throw him into a dumpster. As horrific as that is, that was the evidence. Because on October 4th, the night in question, Daniel Youngkin was home with Simon. But he didn't see Quinton the next morning because he didn't check the pack and play pen where he slept. And I got to tell you, he says it was a decision he later regretted.
Did you believe that there were 3 sleeping children in that room when you woke up?
I did believe that.
Is it fair to say that you were kind of trying to sneak out without disturbing them?
Yeah, because if I wake them up, then it's a whole thing.
Did you look in Quinton's pack and play before you left?
No, I didn't.
You okay?
Yeah.
At some point during the investigation, was there a period of time where you told the police that you had seen him that morning?
Yes, sir.
Were you sure about that at the time you said it?
No.
And are you sure now that you didn't see him?
I didn't look.
I noticed that you seemed, I asked you if you looked, and it seemed like you got a little emotional in response to that question. What is it about that question in particular that makes you upset?
Just, I wish I looked. No, I don't know if it would have made it. Just wish I looked.
Now, as I mentioned, Simon reported Quinton missing on October 5th, and the investigation quickly became focused on her. So what happens is Youngkin ends up cooperating with the FBI, and he allows them to wiretap a hotel room that he was staying in with Simon, and a wiretap conversation showed him pressing Simon about what she was doing in the early morning hours of October 5th.
So what did you do when you left? At 1 in the morning. What did you do?
I went straight up there to the right up to the other shut mine, got the word go, looked around and said, well, it came home.
That's what you did.
Yes.
You can look me in my
I will
eyes.
look at you in your eyes, Danny. That is what I did.
You can look
That
me
is
in
what
my
I did.
Just don't, you don't
Stop.
want to yell.
Look at me in my eyes, too. That is what I did. There was nothing else that I did. I came home and I went to bed. And I woke up to my baby gone. Do you understand me?
So you didn't do anything else?
No, nothing else at all. I was gone for 12 minutes.
And who did you meet?
Missy.
You met Misty.
Yes.
And now the third file, starting with 2017.
I feel like my whole family believes me more than my man does at this point.
I just don't know everything.
You do.
Nobody knows everything.
The only thing we don't know is what happened to Quinton.
So what did happen in your thoughts?
I don't know.
What do you
I
think?
don't know. I have no idea what to fathom. I cannot make up something in my head about what could possibly happen. I have no idea what happened to that baby.
I'm asking you, as a man to my woman, what do you think may have happened? I'm just, we ain't talking a minute about what could have happened.
But we did. We spoke about it last night, and I have no idea what could have happened. I don't care about what could have happened. I want to know what happened.
So where's he at?
I don't know.
Now, moving on from that, Simon had apparently told Youngkin and police that she had met up with a friend of hers, this person called Misty, at a gas station to pick up Oragel. This is an oral remedy for a toothache that she was having. And she claimed this all happened that night. Problem is, Simon's friend Misty, who police later learned was a woman named Melissa Bray, testified she didn't see Simon that night. And as a matter of fact, she actually hadn't seen her in quite some time.
And do you have any nicknames that you go by?
Yep.
What nickname or nicknames do you have?
Missy.
Missy?
Missy.
Missy?
Exactly.
Anybody ever call you Misty with a T?
No.
Do you remember a time where an FBI agent came out to your house at Azalea to talk to you about when was the last time you had had contact with the defendant?
Yes.
Do you remember telling them it had been like July of 2022 that you last saw her?
Yes.
Was there ever a time where she came and met up with you in the middle of the night to get Oragel from you? The
No.
defendant? No? Saying that never happened.
I'm saying it never happened.
Now, to further disprove Simon's story, the state called Sergeant Gary Scott Coleman to the stand. And what he did is he showed video evidence of a vehicle that was determined to be Simon's at dumpsters at around 1 a.m. on October 5th, 2022, when Simon was claiming she went to this gas station. For 2 whole minutes, Simon's car was parked and stationary near the dumpsters.
What area of Azalea Mobile Home Plaza do those apparent vehicle headlights appear to be stationary at for 2 minutes or so?
Judging by where they're stationary and knowing what I knew from the white vehicle being parked there, I believe it to be in the area of the dumpsters.
Now, when you get a look at it at that point, does it appear to you to be the same vehicle that we've been seeing in all these other video clips?
It does.
With that preview, I'll go ahead and play the video clip on slide 26 here. Now, at this point, we're about halfway into this video clip. At this point, do those headlights appear to be stationary in the area of the dumpsters?
Yes, sir.
And when it came to the gas station that she said she drove into, the surveillance footage instead showed her driving right by it.
And what are we going to see here?
You're going to see a car come in from the right-hand side of the screen, make a right-hand turn, and then up at Ogeechee Road or Highway 17, you'll see it make a left-hand turn.
Now, initially, when you see, I guess, the headlights of that car, or maybe the car itself, what road is it going to be on? Is it going to be on that one-way exit road?
Yes. It's kind of a triangle, but it's on the exit part of it.
And it's going to make a right onto the Azalea Road that comes off of Ogeechee, and then a left onto Ogeechee Road itself.
Yes, sir, it will.
Does it come to a complete stop?
Yes, it is coming, and it is signaling that it's going to turn to the left. And now it's turned.
Now, from the footage that we've watched to this point, did that vehicle appear to stop at the Chevron on the way in or
No.
on the way out from Azalea?
No, sir, it did not.
Now, did you all also get video footage from the Chevron itself?
We did pull video from the Chevron station.
And did you look at that video footage to see whether it somehow showed the vehicle stopping at the Chevron station on either end of this trip?
It showed what this video shows.
Does it essentially just show it driving by the Chevron?
Yes, sir, it does.
Azalea, and then later out of Azalea?
Yes.
From there, an FBI agent who interviewed Simon over several days was called to the stand, and he testified that Simon had changed her story about where she was in the early morning hours of October 5th. When agents interviewed Simon and told her that they couldn't corroborate her Origel story, she then told them a different version of what happened.
Origel story, that was a significant change. Where over the course of the interview, she disclosed, agreed that actually did not happen. She told us that she also had trash in the back of the vehicle that was placed in there the night prior, or the day prior, approximately 4:30 on the 4th. And the trash, being that Miss Melissa Bray was not there, the trash was smelling up the car. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:15 in the morning, when she drove by Miss Melissa Bray's house, she wasn't there. She took that opportunity to throw the trash that was in the back of the Dodge Journey into the dumpsters at Azalea Trailer Park.
So as of October 12th, is it fair to say that this was new information from the defendant?
It was. She described getting out of her vehicle on the driver's side, walking along the driver's side to the rear of the vehicle, opening the back hatch of the Dodge Journey, and then pulling the single trash bag out. She demonstrated using two hands to throw the trash bag into the dumpster. She also described before she went to throw the bag in the dumpster, she opened the bag and described smelling the bag. We asked her that multiple times in the interview, describing, is it normal for a person to, knowing that the vehicle was had an odor to it, is it normal for a person to smell the trash before they throw it in the dumpster? And the defendant really didn't have an explanation for that other than she was just smelling the trash before she threw it away.
And during that same interview, Simon revealed something shocking to the special agent.
At some point in this interview, did she say anything about taking responsibility?
She did. It was something to the effect of, if I did this, I'll take responsibility.
And did she tell you that if I was so up that I did something, I'd take responsibility?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And by the way, when authorities began searching the landfill for Quinton's remains, Special Agent Savannah Solomon, who oversaw the search, testified, and she informed Simon of this, about the search efforts. And apparently, Simon's reaction was just bizarre.
I was very confident we were going to find Quinton in the landfill when I spoke to her, yes.
Did you tell her that?
Yes.
How did she react to that?
She said he wasn't in the bag, but it was hard to characterize. It wasn't shock, which is the most surprising thing of it. There were 4 other people that we then notified that were at the house, and it was a picture of 5 different versions of English.
And was there a contrast there in how those people reacted and how the defendant had reacted earlier that day when you told her?
Yes.
Now, talking about the defense, on cross-examination, the defense hammered in on the fact that despite all of the FBI's surveillance efforts, the wiretaps, even Simon's bizarre behavior, Leilani Simon never actually admitted to harming her child.
Let's talk about strangling. Did she say she strangled her kid?
No.
Shot her kid? Stabbed her kid?
No.
Now, after the state concluded its case, Leilani Simon elected not to testify in her own defense. And by the way, her team rested without calling any witnesses. They just relied on cross-examining the state's witnesses. During closing arguments, the prosecutor reminded the jury of this horrifying state of mind that Leilani Simon was in when she chose to drive to a dumpster and literally throw her son away.
It's like 2 minutes that she sits at that dumpster. You don't need 2 minutes to throw away old food, a story that was always ridiculous and totally transparent. She is sitting there thinking about whether she's really going to do this. Because once you put them in there and you drive off, you can't take that back. That Waste Pro truck is coming, and you made your decision. 2 minutes to think about whether she really wants to throw Quinton, her son, in the garbage such that he gets crushed into pieces by the compactor in the garbage truck and ground into pieces at the landfill. She thought about it. She thought about it. And she chose to do it.
The defense focused on what the prosecution did not do, which was explain the circumstances surrounding Quinton's death.
The state's strategy and the way it's presented this case has been basically to tell you, and I don't think I'm stating anything out of place here, that Miss Simon was a slut, a party girl, someone who lies, a horrible mother, someone who didn't act appropriately as a mother. All of these things could be true more or less to some extent, but none of these things have anything to do with the central question in this case. And they still haven't answered that question with evidence, not speculation, okay? The central question in this case is how did Quinton Simon die? Where did Quinton Simon die? And in what manner did Quinton Simon die?
Ultimately, the prosecution didn't need to answer that question. Why? Because the jury returned a guilty verdict on all 19 charges, including murder, concealing a death, falsely reporting a crime, and 14 counts of lying to investigators. And in fact, this month, Leilani Simon was officially sentenced to life in prison plus 10 years with the possibility of parole after 40 years. This is for the 24-year-old. However, I should also tell you in a recent update, a defense attorney for Simon has just filed a motion for a new trial, and that filing reads in part, quote, "The verdict is contrary to the evidence and without evidence to support it. The verdict is decidedly and strongly against the weight of evidence. The verdict is contrary to law and the principles of justice and equity." But assuming that motion really doesn't go anywhere, We are talking about an end to a truly devastating case, and it is one that has haunted Quinton's family and that community for over 2 years. For more Gavel to Gavel trial coverage, head to our Law&Crime YouTube page, and that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us, and as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.